Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I recognize a few faces from classes or other interactions, and I love the IP&T program. It's a good place to come. I think I came about a year ago, and I wanted to ask if anyone was there at my presentation. Maybe it was, I don't know. Okay, so not too many, and I won't assume that you have that information. So I want to just briefly introduce myself. So my background is in information, whatever that is. So I graduated with a PhD in information from the University of Michigan, and really it was focused on there's this kind of new genre of school they call them I-schools for information schools, and they often grew out of library science schools, but people who in my field of human-computer interaction, or people who study social media or communication or information economics, all these topics they kind of bring under one roof. And so I was trained, I guess you could say, as an interdisciplinary scholar, and I've tried to keep that going over the years. So I do some education stuff. I also do some web analytics, and then basically social software. So anything where there's lots of people interacting, and we're trying to design novel software to achieve some kind of goal, whether it's getting people to exercise. This is a game we designed that used Fitbit data to motivate you, or collect scientific data. Flora caching is an example of that. Or what I'll talk about today is alternate reality games that have some education themes. So one of the conferences I like to go to is called CHI. It's the ACM conference for computer-human interaction. That's what CHI stands for, so CHI, and it's kind of a big conference in the field. A group of us ran a workshop on what we call pervasive play this last year, and it's kind of a term, we've also used mixed reality games or whatnot. This is a little more generic, but this defines kind of the space that a growing area of interest to many scholars, and especially in the HCI field. So we're interested in technology-mediated, playful experiences that play out somehow in the real world, but also in some digitally enhanced kind of way. And so these often blend fiction and reality, so we'll talk about that with alternate reality games. And they can sort of transform our existing relationships or maybe even our identity in new and interesting ways. So the kind of high-level questions I've been trying to think about for, I guess, 5 or 6 years now in this area: what educational opportunities do pervasive play experiences provide, and what problems do they introduce? And I think there's lots of different genres of research. I've come to this over many years, but I think the genre that lately I've been practicing mostly would be the genre of invention, which is not a typical research, like you don't read about how to invent in a research methods textbook. So when we publish stuff, we are using the other methods to analyze, how well our inventions worked or whatnot. But I've been interested in, and in general in the field of human-computer interaction, a lot of people are interested in how do you invent novel things and kind of pushing the boundary of what we can do, and then learning from that. And sometimes we invent things that flop, and sometimes we invent things that succeed. But either way, when we try something new, it helps us think about how concepts interact. It helps us define new genres of educational experiences in this case. And it helps us, I guess, rigorously kind of approach a topic. So, some of you might think of yourselves in that same way as ultimately an inventor, although you're trying to learn from those inventions. More so than, if I was working with a company, I'd care just about the bottom line. Here I'm caring about furthering our knowledge through the process of invention and carefully reflecting on how things work. So, a couple other terms that we'll use. One is transmedia storytelling. So, over the past 10, 15 years, people have really started to break the boundaries of traditional storytelling. and storytelling will be a part of what I talk about today. And so you have lots of examples, things like 39 Clues and Kathy's book. Anyone read either? These are books that you can read, but they also have other ways of engaging with that content. So that they're what we call transmedia or across media. So for example, Kathy's book comes with an evidence pack, and if you notice on the front it says, or maybe it's on the other side, it says, oh no, here we go. If found, call, and then it has a real phone number. It's not a 555, right? So if you call that number, you find out about Kathy, who feels like a real person because you're listening to her voice on the answering machine. You can read, this is like a journal, and then it's got all these little artifacts in it that are clues. And then you have a community of people that interact online and talk to one another about, here's what I think is going on, and kind of make sense of the storyline. There's other examples like these rides were these kind of 5-minute experiences. They did one around a TV or a movie. I can't remember what movie it was now, but you were supposed to spy on other people. And so what you did is you enter your text number in to start the thing on a website, and then you get a call. Do you remember which one I'm thinking?
Well, no, I had a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just in general. So like, does this is viral marketing with films, is that considered part of this as well?
Yeah,
or is that
definitely.
like a similar but different feel?
Yeah. So a lot of these actually, so these rides are. They try to do viral marketing through some of these interactive experiences. So they're related, I guess. Although here, it's, the difference is you get to participate in the story in some way. Not all viral marketing campaigns let you participate. Sometimes they just have you share something.
Gotcha.
So these are kind of more immersive experiences. But yeah, they play out in social media and things like that. So the ride's an example. You would type in, give it your phone number, and then you'd get a call, and it would have some, voice of someone, and he's telling you that you need to log into a certain website in the next 2 minutes, or someone you love is in danger, or whatever. So you do that, and then up on the screen, they've, well, some of these, not the one I'm talking about, but some of them will scan your Facebook account if you've given it permission, and they'll show you pictures of people you know, and they sort of turn it into like a horror film or like a suspenseful thing. So kind of crazy, but it feels so real when you're in it because it's people you know, it's bleeding into your world, it's personalized, it's highly connected, and so this whole area of transmedia storytelling is one that people in digital humanities have been exploring for a while, and certainly marketing is where we see the most innovation happening. So one kind of branch of this are what are called alternate reality games. And these are games, this is a definition that we wrote up a number of years ago when they were still kind of new things. And we call them a new genre of transmedia practice, where players collaboratively hunt for clues, make sense of disparate information, and solve puzzles to advance an ever-changing narrative that's woven into the fabric of the real world. In other words, it happens across all these, your social media accounts, or sometimes a payphone that you would call from, or it could bleed into the physical real world as well. And there's, so we have, for the last 4 years, we've had an NSF grant to explore alternate reality games as what's their educational potential. What can we do with them? And we'll be wrapping that up this summer, and we've developed one called, actually before that, we developed one called the Arcane Gallery of Gadgetry, and then we developed Dust, which I talked about a little last time I was here, and then today I'll talk about our last one, the Tessera that we've designed and is currently running. But there's two key concepts here I want to introduce. So one of them is what we call the TINAG ethos. And that stands for this is not a game. Now people know that it's a game. We're not really trying to trick anyone, although there's been some experimental projects where they have sort of blurred that line between reality and not, and we're sort of tricking people. But these ones, we're not trying to trick people. But one of the key principles is if there's any in-game way to do something, you should do that. Where in-game means you can have a character or something introduce it. So for example, in some of these, if we have a tutorial that shows you how to do the website, we don't just have an out-of-game, like, here's how to use this website. Instead, it's all kind of in the voice of a character who's telling you about this stuff, right? So we try to do that as much as possible. It's not always possible, but you'll see our promotion site is branded as kind of an in-game thing that I'll show you in a minute. The other one is that you, in these alternate reality games, you have a puppet master or a group of puppet masters or game runners, and these are people that like interact with players live. So they're acting as if they're characters sometimes, or sometimes they're playing as if they're another player, and you don't really know, if people giving you hints or help are game runners or if they're actual other players. So that's the idea between alternate reality games. There's been several educational ones. These are all kind of educational ones that have played out, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you ever want to talk about those, let me know. So just really high level, and I don't even have references or anything on here, but high level, some things that we think are interesting with these alternate reality games as a learning platform. So one of them is it's experiential learning. I mean, everything in here you're playing it. So you're interacting with people. You're learning by doing. The other one is there's always a concern in education about transfer. If I do a bunch of math problems on a math worksheet, but then I'm posed with some problem in the real world, and I don't realize that it's the same math problem that I was learning, then there's no transfer happening. Or the really sad finding that if you played chess a lot, like I did as a kid, and you enjoy that, that pretty much helps you be a good chess player, and that's about it. It doesn't really, I mean, that's what all the cognitive psychology literature says, as much as I don't want to accept it. I sort of have to. So what you want to do in these games is actually give people practice with skills or knowledge that mirror, or that are actually exactly what we want them doing at some point. So for example, in our Dust game that we did, we were interested in having them do scientific inquiry. So we made up these fictional, like a brain scanner app and a star, you found exoplanets around stars and stuff. We had all these like fake instruments, and then they would use the data from those to actually argue for why they thought the adults had collapsed in this fictional story. But the actual, the core activity that they were doing was scientific inquiry, collecting data, arguing with it, debating with other people about the merits of it. So the exact activity we had them doing was what we want them to do. A slightly different context, a little more exciting because it was a fictional storyline and all that, but so transfer we care about. Identity is another one that we, in the games we've designed, we try to get, especially these are usually middle schoolers, we try to get them to think of themselves in a new way. So for example, in our Dust one, we had a what kind of scientist am I quiz. It was kind of like one of those silly quizzes you do where, pick the circle thing that you like the most. And, it wasn't like a real, quiz that, but in the end, it had all these options of like, oh, you might be a good, microbiologist, and here's what they do that's cool. Or you might make a good whatever. And they would choose their role within NASA, in that game. To do that. In this game, the tests are all talking about how we do that a bit. So we're trying to get people to think of myself as, oh, maybe I didn't think of myself as a scientist before, but I don't know, I've kind of played the role of a scientist and it wasn't that bad, it was kind of fun, and maybe I could become a microbiologist, or in this case of the Tessera, maybe that computer science-y stuff isn't so bad after all. It's actually not just programming. There's all these other kind of fun problem-solving aspects to it. And then some other things we've been looking at are how do we embed assessments into these game-like experiences, and that's like a whole other topic. But anyway, so these are some of the issues we've been dealing with. A while back, when I was at the iSchool at Maryland, we developed this unified meta-literacies framework, and we were looking at how alternate reality games let you do all these things. They actually have you as part of the game searching the internet for clues, and so you're gathering information, you're making sense of it, you're managing it, you're solving problems, creating content. You have to kind of, in some of these anyway, you have these kind of ethical and legal and respect issues, and you're collaborating with people. And so we thought about all these information practices, the kinds of things that often librarians and others care about, but they show up all over, right? I mean, we're inspired by the 21st century literacy learning outcomes that were coming out, and a lot of those were including things like collaborate and things about ethical, behavior and whatnot. So, and in this paper we kind of articulated how alternate reality games were doing this, even the ones that weren't designed to do it. Just because of the nature of the fact that the clues are hidden all over, you have to collaborate to work together, you're doing sense making is the main thing you're doing, and often you add your own kind of elements, your own story, kind of, and you create things. So I want to, well, I'll just mention high level, we're going to focus on the Tessera today, but we ran Dust, I guess a couple years ago now, and it was focused on scientific inquiry. Tessera is focused on computational thinking. And then we've also been running things, and I talked about this a little bit last time I was here, but we call them playable case studies. And they're basically replayable alternate reality games, kind of designed for an in-class and like a hybrid in-class, out-of-class learning activity. And yeah, so anyway, I'm not going to talk about that today, but I want to talk to you about the Tessera. But I should pause here for a second and just ask if there's questions about just any of this alternate reality games or pervasive play. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I wonder about is like who does this, and like how do these get started?
Yeah. So far, the majority of projects of alternate reality games have been created by people marketing things, games, movies. So there was one tied to the TV show Lost, if you ever saw that. The Lost Experience is one. There was one tied to one of the Batman movies, the second Batman movie. There's been ones tied to like games that have come out, like Halo and whatnot. So they've been kind of an experimental marketing effort. So some of the high-end, like well-funded ones have been like that. Then there's, on the other extreme, you have people, you'll have a teacher that wants to try doing something, and they'll kind of make up their own thing that's kind of low tech, but could be funny and engaging. And so we've seen some educational ones, come out that have been funded, but they're all kind of one-off things. It's still pretty early and emerging, for sure.
That kind of is my question, because I'm really into this kind of stuff, these games, like this is my hobby.
Uh-huh.
And one thing though, when applying it to education, I'm just wondering what kinds of things could be done to make it so this can be a reoccurring experience. And it looks like you have those micro ones that maybe a class.
Well, and actually, so part of our grant was, we know that alternate reality games, they typically play out over a long period of time. It's like a couple of months. And they're a one-time thing. When they're done, they're done. And you put in, a year's worth of effort or something to pull one of these off, it seems like a waste, right? So part of what we actually said is we're going to try to make these replayable as well. So we'll do the live launch, then we'll make a replayable version and look at how well that works. We did that with Dust, and so we had a bunch of teachers that ran it after the fact in like a couple week kind of module around scientific inquiry, and we had lesson plans that accompanied it. And there were some challenges, things that we've changed in the Tessera, because one of them was, well, you pull out the puppet master, the people who created all of the initial game know it inside and out. But if you're a teacher taking this on, especially for the first time, there's a lot to digest. And so we had tools for them to be able to play the role of puppet master or game master, so they would kind of advance the storyline. When they in their class were ready, they would advance to day 2 of the kind of simulated world, and then lots of content would release. But it was a pretty high overhead for teachers to do, especially the first time, like I said. So that was one thing in the Tessera we sort of cut out some of the thing, that, you know, the rich interaction that teachers could do, and then we have that happen, but more, it's a little more separated out from the system itself. So there might be in-class activities they do, and then they go online and do them, or lessons that complement them. But yeah, it's a tricky challenge. So that was one of them. You have to make them replayable in my mind, and then are they even an alternate reality game?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, we've sort of been settling on something, it's a little different, but we call them playable case studies, but those are based more off of realistic situations, like a real case study of them, whereas these replayable ARGs are a little more fanciful. Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of similarities between this and adventure learning. I don't know if you're familiar with that. University of Minnesota has done a lot of that, where they, like the Go North project, they'll send a team of explorers to go to the Arctic Circle, and classrooms and students will follow them and do activities along with them and blog back and forth to them. So like you have a real life event, and then you have classroom activities where students are connecting with that. So I guess I'm just wondering, do you see connections between this and maybe kind of those kinds of activities, or?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I ask because I think the adventure learning folks, they've struggled with this issue that you bring up of replicability, of doing it over and over again, because it costs a lot of money, and you have one expedition and then it's over, right? And can you scale that? Can you do it over and over again? And so it seems like you're grappling with the similar issues, because it's a very similar kind of thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah, is that the same group that does the epistemic games? Is that the
I don't think
Schaefer?
so.
No.
Maybe not,
No.
because that's another one that's sort of tangentially related. So I'll have to talk to you about that. I'm not as familiar with that literature, but yeah.
Is anybody looking at cost right now? Like,
Not, well, certainly people funding the, like, promotions ones, you know, the advertisers.
Sure.
But not really. So, I think because it's so early on, there's not, we don't even know if they work, let alone can we do it for cheaper.
right?
So it's still kind of early on. But I will say, the ones we've done are on the high end of cost. So I would say these take about $300,000 to $400,000 to pull off. And so the ones that we've done, but that's like really high-end art and, you know, music and all, although we have a lot of students here that are really talented.
I was gonna say it's high-end art, but you're getting high-end talent at a very cheap price. 'Cause you
We
get
are,
the
so it's probably
students,
more if
so.
it wasn't, yeah, that the case. But some of them are done for cheaper for sure, because they just don't take on things that are as challenging. You know, they limit, because they, you know, hiring writers that are good, they're not nearly as expensive as, say, animators or musicians or whatever. And they can do some pretty cool alternate reality games just using social media and like simple webcam videos and things.
I ask because when I was, a decade and a half ago, when I was at Indiana University, they were exploring a lot of these things too, and it seemed like, for example, Sasha Barab was doing a bunch of work in early gaming where they're trying to connect it directly to education, and it seemed like they moved to a point where they were saying, okay, we know that we can get students engaged in this kind of activity, but can we make it sustainable? So can we do it in a way that it can sustain itself, as
Right.
opposed to, having to have researchers and grant money and all these
Sure.
things pouring in to make it, happen.
Yeah, so I've been exploring that a little more with our playable case studies, which I think are actually probably where we'll end up with most of this stuff. The other stuff's fun to do, but, and I mean, they're a little different, but I think those could be self-sustaining. So we've been running, in fact, this morning I was out at a high school observing the class using our microcore simulation, and I think they found it very different than how they normally teach in a good way. It's, the kids get sucked into it. And now that they all have Chromebooks or things, it's more viable to do some kind of hybrid learning experience. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch. So we can come back to that in a minute. But let's talk for a minute about the Tessera. So first of all, some of our kind of high-level goals. So we wanted to make it immersive and engaging to middle schoolers. So 13 to 16 is kind of our core audience. And we really wanted to work for boys and girls. Sometimes games are considered to be more kind of male-focused, although that's not really true. It depends on what type of game. So if you look at like word games, there's a lot more women that tend to play those. And if you look at kind of first-person shooter, there's a lot more men. Here we were going for something that would hopefully work for both groups, and we do have a lot of both players right now. We wanted to, by the end, have players see themselves as kind of computational thinkers and innovators, and that's the identity thing I talked about earlier. We also wanted them to develop some computational thinking mindsets, and actually, I think that's we didn't really have some. I have skills and knowledge a bit. There's not a whole lot of knowledge we cover. It's not a. There's a lot of like how to program things out there that are pretty good for that, like code.org. You can find all sorts of those. We weren't really interested in that. We were more interested in how do you get people, what are some computational thinking mindsets? One of them is you tinker with stuff. You mess around with things to learn. It's, in my field in the IT department, the students who you have to kind of hand the, do this and then do that, they don't succeed. It's got to be, they just like to tinker and poke and prod. And so you'll see how we kind of try to do that in this game. The other one is when you hit a snag, what do? You got to debug. You've got to figure out what you did wrong and debug it and understand it. So that's another mindset. There's some challenging puzzles in here. Sometimes you start one and then you run out of time and you've lost it all, you have to start again. But we want this idea of persistence in the face of diversity, and then just problem solving, kind of sort of approaches to what are some is there a better way of doing this, or we want people to start reflecting on the process of it as well. And then of course for a research perspective, we're interested in all these kind of what works well. So we actually have two parts to this. I probably won't have time to talk about both. So we have this, we call it the Tessera Light in the Dark, which is the online experience. And I say online, there's some real world components to it, but not a ton. And then there's the Tessera Ghostly Tracks, which is at the Computer History Museum. And they've run it with a couple of school groups that have come in. And that was kind of fun working with them. They're both in the same fictional universe. The Tessera is an organization of innovators, and Ada Lovelace, whose ghosts you see here, is kind of our guide through this world. And you become this kind of member of the Tessera as you start. So I'm going to jump over, and I'll show you one thing before that as well, and that's just we've mapped some of the learning to these ISTE standards in computational thinking. A lot of the learning outcomes for computational thinking are sort of being created now, and I know some of your faculty and our faculty in the TE program are looking at that. But you'll notice some of these computational thinking skills like pattern recognition, decomposition, abstraction, show up. And then, anyway, so I'm going to jump over and show you, kind of walk through some of our thinking as we design this. So this is our promotion site, which was up early, but it's also the way you enter. It has this kind of mysterious vibe, right? You see this flashlight and whatnot. That gets annoying, so you can turn the light bulb on. And we have our little...
I wish I'd seen that.
Yeah, that's right. So it's funny, too, because sometimes I'll have adults that go in and try this stuff, and they're just not really good. Once the game even starts, and they're like, what do I do? And then I have like my 7-year-old son who just works through the first couple levels without any guidance, and I'm like, it's interesting. But that's kind of this mindset of discovery and exploration. So I'm going to play this video real quick. There's some nice music playing, but I don't want to bother with that right now. So this is showing our online. I'll show you some of these levels, and the idea is that you're working through these different, and we followed a kind of game idea of different levels to ultimately help save the Tessera and their knowledge from this evil force S, which represents entropy. And so there's this kind of destructive force, and it has a spooky vibe. We weren't going for horror, it's more like just kind of spooky. That's about the creepiest we get. But anyway, it's kind of a hopefully engaging meme. At this age, kids like to be scared a little and play around. It's kind of a gothic feel. In here, we have some quotes, and again, it's not clear if this is in-game or out-of-game, but we talk about S, this character, and how he is all around us trying to break down things that we create. We have some game art. We say we're looking for new recruits, basically, and then we need help. We need you. We're the Tessera, and then we also have, for those entrusted with training young minds, we have our educational brief, which is our out-of-game kind of, here's what this is, here's the learning outcomes, and all of that. So, but you see the kind of theme is, well, can we do this game? So once we launch the game, then we log into this kind of cool Parallax site. We have a little tutorial that guides you through it, and we're at the first level. And this is kind of like a point-and-click adventure. If you've done, what are the...
Myst,
Myst. Some of you are older ones, so you remember Myst, or Raven, or whatever. Yeah. So, there's different things that you see, I can click on. A lot of people... So this is kind of a clue that later I might use, but, Ada is the name Ada Lovelace, but they don't really know that yet. There's also, we have some hidden things that I've already collected, which are these little cards, and we have a card game that accompanies it that you can play in the real world or one of the ones online. And so these are historical innovators and people that have created stuff. Some are actually alive still, and you can collect their cards, and then they all have a unique code that you can enter if you want to play the card game, which I'm not going to do right now. But those are just kind of give you something else to click on and find, and I think I've already found it. So here we're going to move on. Now, one of the challenges is we knew we didn't, like most good games, you should be able to learn how to play by just playing it. We didn't want to have like an instruction manual that came along with this. So, but we did need something and some guidance because we have different levels of skill. So in each level, our kind of compromise is we created this, what we call the Caretaker's Guide. And so this introduces, it's all in a story, and so, this is to my replacement, my time has come, I have to leave, basically. And then this caretaker leaves a few notes. And there's one of these little guidebooks in each chapter, or in each level, rather, and these are our educational scaffolding. So here, we also have a chance to introduce some terminology. And when we do this as a replayable thing, we'll have, we already are developing the lesson plans where you would learn about networks. I'll show you the puzzle in a minute. But we introduced 3 core concepts. We have a node, an edge that connects them, and the degree is the number. So this has 4 because there's 4 lines connected to it. So that's, and then we have a little instructions that aren't super easy to understand, but you actually don't even need that. We've play tested this a lot, and even without that, you can typically solve the puzzles. So here's one of our hidden puzzles. We have to click on ADA, and then we unlock a little key. And then once we have that, we can insert that key into our little door lock. And we have a few little videos. Now this is our first network puzzle, and if you don't know how to do it. You know, we have these little cryptic things, I believe some connect the pegs together. So you can't really see the whole thing, but you can, you know, if you click around just by trial and error, you're going to solve this one. And these get increasingly difficult over time. So this is just the first one, and oh look, we found a little peg. And there's not much computational thinking going on yet. This is more just introducing the interface and whatnot. But the network game, we will get to that in a later level. So here we have little hints just by the visual interface here. So you can kind of, you know, kind of guess that that might be the case, and then we can create another one. And so that was the learning outcome here, is just you can actually connect to, or rather the little piece, you know, the thing you were supposed to learn from doing that one. And then we get our third key, and I'm not going to go through all the levels, but I'm doing this one to kind of show you how we use this idea of introducing things slowly over time. And this one, you can do by trial and error. I've seen kids do it, but it's better if you understand it. And usually by the time they finish this one, they actually do understand it. Now, there's lots of strategies for filling these out. And you notice I started at one end of the puzzle, and that makes it a little easier. But those kinds of things, we would have a teacher reflect with the students on, okay, let's talk about the best strategy or algorithm for approaching these problems. You know, if you start with the low note, like anything that has number 1, it has to connect to just one place. You can start there. There's a few different rules you can use. So this is where we give you a whole deck of cards that you can play, and then we can enter in now and enter level 2. And I don't have the sound on. There's some kind of spooky theme music and sounds. And this introduces the chat. So there's actually people online right now. It looks like some people in the chat window. We have a swear word filter, but hopefully it's doing its job well. We also have other students that kind of monitor this stuff and make sure things are appropriate. We also introduce the forum, or rather here. So we have a forum. It doesn't look quite as dark, but the monitor is a little bit. So you can look at questions. So if people are having trouble, you know, with parts of it, then they can log in here and you can see that, you know, people post stuff, and these are all the threads. There's a bunch of replies to as well. So anyway, this is sort of community building. It wants me to finish my tutorial.
Derek, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I were doing this for replayability,
Yeah.
and I'm a teacher who wants to do it in my class, is there a way to create sort of closed groups?
Yeah, that's the part that we haven't done yet. And we're technically that's the one thing we have to do. So with Dust we have to do that, right? So you can spin up your own class and that. We may try a different model this time where you don't do that. Where you're always, it's a perpetual replayable thing that anyone can join and leave at different times, which sort of works with the level approach. So we haven't done the replayable, we're still on, we have one more level to launch this Friday, the final level, and then the idea is to do the replayable. But most of this is replayable as it is, and we've thought about that from the start.
So one thing I've seen a lot in games like this is that somewhere along the road, someone gets nervous that the learning isn't explicit enough.
Yes.
And so there will be someone who says, we've got to scale back the intrigue or the mystery or to figure it out on their own to make sure that they really get those learning objectives that we want to hit.
Right.
It sounds like you may have experienced that just by your reaction, and if so, how would you wrestle with that issue?
Yeah, so...
And let me just make one more comment. The reason the thing I see happen is when we make it more educational, the less fun it becomes, right?
Right.
So people are less interested in playing it because we're being a little more explicit in revealing, the
Or
learning
sometimes
content.
we end up focusing on the knowledge outcomes and not on the other kind of higher level things going on.
Yeah.
Because I think about this all the time. How do I teach my IT students to be capable of finding answers on their own, on the internet. That's like a key skill. If you know, you guys know that, you do technical stuff. And the only way to do that is to get them to do it a whole bunch and then reflect on that. So our lesson plans typically, so first of all, this was funded on an informal learning grant. So, but we did say we care about a formal learning setting as well. And so we want to look at that. And our lesson plans really are where that comes in. So we might have a lesson on networks when we get to that, or on binary, or on whatever the concepts are we're trying to cover, they can get their sort of knowledge outcome thing in there. And then hopefully this would be fun enough that if it was homework to try to get through level 2, kids would want to do that and not complain. But that is a struggle. So I'm not going to go through this level. I want to jump to level 5, which I can do because I've already passed the level. We don't let you jump ahead unless you've passed it, right? And here we have Ada, who kind of is our guide, and is the story kind of unfolds as she tells it here. And she says the locking system, S is broken in, he's gotten in this far. We have to develop some more of these locks for the doors, and we need your help. And then we have our little thing that describes the workflow of what you need to do. And here you go in, and this is where now we have them creating a network diagram puzzle, and you really have to understand it when you create it and debug it. So this is our tutorial level, so we just are matching up. We're introducing also the idea of an array, or JSON if you want to get technical, although we don't really say it in those terms. So right now all I'm doing is putting the debris on each of these spots to match the tutorial part here. And then I test it, and it creates a representation of this. And I can, so we get the idea of testing, right, which is a key concept of all of this. And then what we'll do is, oops, I hit print, and I get this little card that goes into my inventory that's blinking down here. And then I can put that into this little reader, or maybe I put it in here.
We gotta figure it out.
Dang it, I forgot where I am now. Shoot. Well,
There's a guide bug in the bottom.
what happens is, oh, I jumped in too quick there. Oh, actually, maybe I don't even need it yet. Well, anyway, so these ones are games that others have created. So these are all ones that other players have created. Some are pretty complicated, right? And they also have the average time it takes people to solve. So this one's actually hard, even though, and then people give it like how many people have solved it and whatnot. So you have to create 3 of these and debug them. So you create other ones here, and then others test them. So again, the idea is that you engage with it and think through it a bit more in this kind of level. Let me just show you one other. So that one introduces some network concepts. A couple other levels introduce you to more traditional kind of computational thinking concepts. So this level, we have the lights are out, and you have to kind of figure out how to turn them on. And you're given, anyone recognize these symbols?
Yeah, those are engineering symbols.
Digital logic, so there's like an and a not and an or gate. And we have this simple kind of, this first level, again, the tutorial level, this would be like the and gate. I stick it on, the goal is to turn this light on, which they kind of figure out by trial and error. This one's our not symbol, and this one's our regular symbol, so we've lit up every one. And that was the only place you could put those, right? Then what we do, and I didn't show you this on other levels, but you create a party, because a lot of these are collaborative. The idea is you play with your friends and get them to do it with you. And so she says, okay, let's turn the lights on, and then we give you some more difficult ones. And they get increasingly hard, and then later we show you there's like, sometimes one of these is broken, so you don't know if it's lit up or not, and then they have multiple dependencies. So, but the point is they're learning circuitry, basic circuitry by doing this in a kind of fun, engaging way that unfolds over time, and it fits into the story. The last level, which we're actually, it's not released yet, so I have my little secret way of getting there. So.
Somebody texted that out.
Yeah, so this one's based off of a card game we developed, but they play it online, and the idea is that you go in here, and we just have dummy data in there now, but you'll enter one of these things. So these aren't what you'll see. This is my students goofing around with drawings, but the game will be, we show you a card of an invention, and then we show you a verb, something like adapt or exaggerate or shrink. And then you're supposed to come up with your own invention that you describe, so you'll have like a little create thing. And you'll draw your invention, you'll describe it, and then you'll submit it, and other people will rate these, and then there's basically a different Tessera member for each pillar that we'll have, that will be saying, like, I've chosen, they basically will curate which one of these submissions to create. And this game is focused more on innovation, design thinking, and creativity. It's kind of like the Scamper activity that we do in like Innovation Bootcamp, if you've done that. And then at the end, and I've got to wrap up here, but at the very end, what will happen is once the community, all the players have filled up all of these pillars with their new inventions, then you will you'll get your own Tessera card, and you'll upload a photo of yourself and write a little info about what you're known for and stuff. And again, playing with this identity idea that you are enhancing. So there's other levels that introduce things like binary or other kinds of concepts, but that's kind of the Tessera.
All right. Well, we want to thank Derek for coming.